The Real Estate Photography Podcast is brought to you by tourbuzz.net, high-definition virtual tour and photograph hosting, now with interactive floor plans. Sign up for your free trial today. Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Photography Podcast with Mike Muriello. Today we're going to talk about licensing, kind of give a quick introduction to licensing terms, setting them, realizing what they are, and estimating values, and all that nice stuff. But I wanted to say thank you to a reader who kind of wrote in and had some questions about it and suggested I do a podcast on it because I realized we hadn't really talked about it in depth. So here we go, licensing. There are a couple different components to a license, and there's a digital and online, and then there's print and publication, and these are two separate components because you can split them up and say, I only want to give out a digital or online license to this image, or I only want to give out a print and publication license to this image, or maybe you say, I'm going to give both to this client for whatever reason that is. But just realize these are typically split in two, so you have options. For digital and online, that just means it's electronic use only. It lives on a screen and nowhere else. So it could be on the web, it could be on someone's computer. It doesn't matter, but it's on a screen. It's never printed on paper. It's intangible. It's only electronic format. It could even be a compressed image, so you avoid the risk of it being printed. And it's typically unlimited because you can't really control where it's going to go. From there, I mean it'll be on their website, and you can't say it can only be seen 1,000 times and then it has to go away, which is why it's typically unlimited. Typically, print publication, this is a little bit different. It's obviously printed. It's only living on paper. It's actually a tangible image once it's printed, and it can be limited. And I should have put typically here because either one can be, but typically for print, you say, well, it can be limited to this amount of runs, but we'll get that in that next section. So if you actually wanted to limit the license in digital terms or print terms, for digital you would say, I'm limiting it to a specific website, and it might be a builder's website. You say, you can only use it on this website, you can't give it out, blah, blah, blah. You can also say, this image will expire, I don't know, 2 years from now. You're only allowed to use this image for 2 years. Or you can say, unlimited. It's yours for however long you want it. These are your choices. And with print limits, you can say, I only want it to be used in a specific campaign. So if your builder is doing a blast of the projects from the last year, you say it can only be used in this campaign. You can also say, I only want it for this number of prints, and you can say, I only want it to be used in a run of 1,000. Anything after that, I'll be charging this much. These are your choices. You can also say expiration date. Same as digital. You say it'll be 2 years from now. You can't use it anymore. You can also say unlimited. You can say you can use it for however long you want. And I think part of this knowledge is that the image will be used less and less over time, because if the builder's doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is building, they'll have new projects that they'll want to showcase. Pricing structure. Pricing is tied to the value of the image to your client. I think this is the most important point I could possibly make, because when you're estimating your pricing, this is similar to estimating your pricing for any shoot. Someone says, how much should I charge for a shoot? Well, that's a very complicated answer because we don't know what the value of your images that you're going to produce are to the client. For example, a single image is often worth exponentially more to an architect than an entire batch of photos to a builder. And that's because of the business model that each one of those businesses have. It's just the way it works. Estimating the value, I keep coming back to this, is absolutely crucial to setting licensing prices. You have to know your client in order to set the price. I guess we should also talk about why you're charging a licensing fee. Typically, you're charging a licensing fee because your images were commissioned by another party. Any other party, so you were well, we'll get to that in a second, but any other party wishing to use them for commercial gain must agree to the terms that you set. Your photos are not public domain. You own them. You have the copyrights to those images because you created them. Builders will often think, well, it's my house because I built it. That's true, and they're more than willing, or I should say, they're more than able to hire someone to go take pictures of the house. They don't have to buy yours, but if they'd like the ones that you created, they're gonna have to go through you. The fee is only one part of the agreement. Just remember, the limits of the terms are just as important as the fee. Most of the time, if you're dealing with a new builder, they'll say, how much? But they're not worried about what other things am I getting because they think they're going to get everything just for paying a fee. I wanted to go into a couple of different hypothetical licensing fee scenarios. For this one, the work was commissioned by a real estate agent, and then the builder saw the images and they wanted for his or her portfolio. So say you were paid $100 to shoot the images for the real estate agent. I would estimate for that fee, maybe a digital and print license fee would be around $65 to $75, and that's unlimited. And that's obviously, you do the math, between 65 and 75% of the cost that you were paid, because the value of these images are probably worth that much. If you're shooting a whole batch and they're getting a whole batch, maybe they're getting between 15 and 25 images. That's a hefty amount of images, and the value of those images are probably around there. And these are, I'm not throwing a dart in the dark and landing on this number. I would say this has been my experience. It's about 65 to 75% of the price that you were paid to shoot is typically the value to the builder. Here's another situation. The work was commissioned by an art director, and an architect would like a few images for her or his portfolio. And notice, I'm talking about a few images. I'm not talking about the entire batch of 100. So if you were paid $1,000 for the shoot, the digital and print licensing fee, I would feel comfortable with saying 20% for the first image, $180 for the second, $162 for the third. And what I'm doing there is I'm saying what I'm comfortable with, again, is I'm comfortable with a pricing model that decreases the price by 10% for each additional image. And that is for a couple of different reasons, but the primary reason is to entice the buyer, the architect in this situation, to purchase more than one image. And your work will be seen by more people, and you're giving them a little bit better of a deal and making them feel like they aren't being gouged. So I think that's pretty comfortable. And the reason is that these images are going to be used much differently by the architect than they will be by a builder. There's going to be a different marketing blitz. They're going to be seen by different types of clients. It is a different market. So the value for an architect is going to be higher than the value of a builder. Setting the terms in print is also another question that I completely glossed over when I think other people and I were talking about licensing. But writing out licensing does not have to be complicated. It doesn't have to look like the end user license agreement when you accept software, or it doesn't have to look like the bottom of the screen when you're watching a car commercial and they say, $100 a month, you can own this car for $100 a month, and then it has all that white lettering down there. It doesn't have to look like that. And the simplest method that I always recommend is include the terms of the agreement in the description of the invoice. You don't have to attach a separate legal document to the invoice that says, see terms here. You can always just write out in a few sentences, in plain English, the terms of the agreement. And just to summarize, it's really important to estimate and meet the value to the client. Know the difference between digital and print licenses, and you can price them accordingly. For the scenarios that I gave, I'm giving both digital and print license in this hypothetical situation. And that's for a few different reasons, and mostly because people don't want to hassle with keeping track of numbers of how many prints, whatever. They don't want them to expire. So I'm just giving you an example if you were to give everything. And then Set the terms in print. So it could be in the description, and I always recommend in the description of the invoice itself, so things are always in the same place. And then lastly, leave the door open for future business, because you don't want your client, whoever's buying the license, to feel like they've been gouged on price because they really want the images and then they're not going to work with you anymore. Leave the door open for future business. It's my best recommendation after estimating and beating the value of your client. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Have a good one.